The House of Mystery presents Inside Writing, the radio show where authors discuss their writing process in all genres.
You are back in the House of Mystery, and of course I'm Al Warren, and it must be Tuesday because Dr. Michael Hawley is here.
How you doing, Al?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. Now today we are talking to an author, an educator. There's all sorts of stuff. Like he's got it all going on. Now his newest book, on the release date of November 8th. Is Blue Like Me, and it's Trevor Finnegan Book 2, and the author of this, Phillip Clark. So thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
How did it all start for you? I mean this in a sense that, okay, it looks like you've had quite the experience in your life. Like you took a lot of things that happened to you and you turned it into writing. Is that a fair assessment?
I would say so. I mean, I think, early on my interests, well, I would say I was always interested in writing, but I did have this notion early on that I would, be a visual artist and, maybe draw comic books or something like that. And so, I ended up going to art school, and while there, I realized that I had more of an interest in writing, and I decided to focus on that. And so actually I studied screenwriting first, and then from there I studied fiction.
Do you know, you've got quite the reputation.
Oh no, I don't know if that's good or bad.
No, actually,
yeah, that's right.
No, and I mean this in a nice way. And people know me; I'm not really very nice. So, but no, because we get like a couple hundred people and agents. We get a lot of stuff coming in into the show and stuff like that. And I throw a lot of stuff out at the co-hosts and stuff like this. And when your name went up, I got 4 or 5 different co-hosts saying, "Wow, he's really good."
Oh wow!
And I mean that. So yeah, so that's what I mean by you've got a reputation, because a lot of times I'll have people on and they're like, "Oh, nobody knows him or nobody knows her," and nothing gets said. And other times I get, of course, there's like Dean Koontz, and you got everybody and their dog coming after me. But when there's people, because I hadn't really heard of you before, no offense, I just hadn't. And then all of a sudden, so when your name was on my listing, all of a sudden it was like, oh yeah, he's great. He's a really good writer, So,
And I got the co-host.
Yeah, he got co-host. He won the fight. But I always wonder because, okay, so you're doing this, and obviously you're doing it well. You're a good writer because other writers and hosts, and they talk about you. So, that's a good thing. But you yourself, how do you know when you've written something that you think is good?
Well, that's a tough one. I think, I think it's something more innate, to be honest with you. Like, I know when I'm writing something, and I know when it's a little bit undercooked. Like, I know when I look at it and I say, okay, this is good, but it's not where I want it to be. And, I'll take a break, maybe give it a few days, and then return to it. Let's say I'm working on a scene and I feel like, there's something just missing here. And truthfully, 9 times out of 10, if I just walk away from it, I guess you call it inspiration or, what have you, but something kind of sparks, and then I know how to either fix that scene or maybe even rewrite it or just get a little more out of it in terms of character development, or a way to further advance the plot. And so, I think, I don't know if that's necessarily knowing that it's good. It's more of just knowing that it works. And, I'll leave it up to the readers to let me know if it was good.
Well, Al, I think what I think about it with Aaron is, I call it the golden triangle: discipline, perseverance, and confidence. Oh no, that's yours, Aaron. But when I was reading on it, I thought, you know what? That is so true. You know, because I can tell you teach this, because this is exactly how I feel when I feel confident about something.
Yeah, I mean, it is the golden triangle, and I think that and I'll back up a little bit. So when it comes to confidence as a writer, I think you really have to have it to even sit down and write something that you intend to publish, right? That you actually are going to put out there and say, hey, I expect and hope readers, are going to connect with this material, and I believe in it enough that I think a publisher will publish this. And so I think that that's kind of the first step, because that's truly what separates authors from writers. And I tell my students that all the time. There's a lot of people out there who can write, but those manuscripts may never come out the drawer. You have to know that you're an author, and that means that you intend to publish. And so that's a definitive difference there. So I think early on you have to have that confidence. Now, there's going to be stories people connect to, and maybe some that they don't, or perhaps not as much. We all say, hey, we had that, great novel, and then we had, that okay novel, But the idea is just to keep publishing. There's no, it's not like the movie industry. It's not like you can write maybe a book that's not, as successful as the last one, and then everyone forgets your name. Like writers, we have a lot of leeway. We can keep going. We can do a lot of different things. And so that's the beauty of it.
Right. Let me write this down, because I want to make a career out of writing here. So I'm trying to, I'm taking notes here so I can figure out how to be successful here. When you talk about, let's say, your characters in here, and of course, obviously, Trevor Finnegan is a main character here. How do you experience that character? Like, is this something that you see like a movie in your head, or is this something like you hear voices, or is it something totally separate? You don't feel that way at all?
Well, it really starts with kind of this seed of a thought that a character might have. And sometimes it's a question. Sometimes it's an existential question in Trevor's case. And he has many of those throughout the series. But it really started like that, with him. And the question that kind of came to mind when I was thinking about, I was trying to develop this character, this young police officer, the rookie detective, was what would happen to a detective like him, or what would happen to a young rookie who was thrown in a particular circumstance, kind of thrown a curveball in his career, and decides to leverage it for his own advantage, take advantage of it, leverage it to advance his career. And, I said to myself, well, what if he's not necessarily a bad guy though, right? If he believes he's doing it for the right reason. And I kind of played with that a little bit. And I said, what type of character would that be? How, and I guess in many ways I kind of reverse engineered him, because I started there, and then I decided to kind of take some steps back and think about, well, what would his home life be growing up? And, what would have to happen in his life to give him that sort of mindset? So I developed his father, and, I had his father be a retired police officer, who had his own demons. And, I gave him loss. I had his mother die early from cancer. And, I kind of started with this idea of he's already a little bit broken, and he's seduced by this. Later, once he joins LAPD, he's seduced by this notion that he can truly enact change, but first he has to do these other deeds that are not, that are unsavory, and very shady, but he thinks he's doing it for the right reasons. And so that's really where he came out of. He came out of, a little bit of a fear, when I was in the police department, I would see certain things and I would say, would I do that if I was in that situation? Or they would tell us stories in the academy, and I'd say, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't do that. But then again, if you're in a particular situation, you don't know. And that's, quite scary. It could be quite scary if you don't, you don't truly know what you would do until you're in a particular situation.
Yeah. Kind of a confidence with what you want to do or what you do. Well, how much of your own history with police and being on the force goes into this then?
I would say early on, in terms of Trevor's experience in the academy and really how he's having to deal with this changing department. I went in 2014 in the police academy. And so it was a very yeasty period, very kind of high energy, just in terms of the fact that there were so many calls for reform. And so, I was witnessing a police department that was now reacting to that. And for Under Color of Law, that first book, I really wanted to capture that environment because it was a very interesting environment because training was no longer proactive. It had taken a very interesting turn where there was an added layer of, you better be doing what you're supposed to be doing because if you're not, someone out there where the camera is going to catch you. And it had become ingrained in every training exercise, to the point where you might have a training officer who's hiding, watching you, So, it could be anything. It could be exercise. It could be, so the idea was this, you need to be doing what you're supposed to be doing because as long as you're doing that, you're not going to have any problems. And so that kind of environment, was like an extra layer of stress that already existed, but now you have this other layer of almost like a fear because, with LAPD, it's like, well, if you do anything outside of this kind of protective umbrella, you're on your own, right? So your union rep's not going to have your back. No one's going to have your back. So you do anything outside of the policy, established policy, then, you better have a good lawyer. And so I think that kind of helped fuel for Under Color of Law, helped fuel that world a little bit. Where officers were already on edge and were already kind of, for lack of a better word, kind of taking sides about in terms of who's right, who's wrong, who's deemed an enemy. But at the end of the day, it was the community. It's all the community, and so you can't separate that because that's who we were supposed to be policing, and not just policing, but helping. So you can't make those distinctions that it's us and them because that's how essentially as a department you're going to fail. So, I wanted to kind of capture that. For Blue Like Me, it's a little bit different because, it's set a few years after, Trevor goes through kind of his crucible in that first book and, he can no longer be a cop, which makes sense, after the end of Color of Law. But now he's a private investigator and he's trying to make amends for some of the choices that he made while he was in uniform and then as a detective. And he likens it to an albatross of I have to do this as this PI. And he's a particular type of PI because he's actually out there trying to find and investigate officers who are not living up to their mandate. And he works for this law firm and there's this tip line and they get tips from the public because they're kind of worried and afraid. A lot of the people in the community are worried and afraid to go to law enforcement with it or internal affairs because they don't think anything is going to happen. So he's taking it, he takes the responsibility and he says, hey, I'll investigate these things and bring it to light if something really is going on that's not appropriate.
So he's kind of like an internal affairs kind of person himself, investigator.
Very much so, yes.
Do you find that a lot of people like books, movies, or shows and stuff that have this sort of center? You have like a cop, ex-cop, PI, or maybe not a PI, just sort of someone that was a cop. And do you think that this whole thing is portrayed very well in media, for instance, right now?
For the most part, No, it a lot of it doesn't mirror how it really is. For a long time, I didn't want to write a cop novel. I fought it, because it was, first of all, it was incredibly close to home. So I have law enforcement in my family. And then, I was in the academy, so I just didn't have a desire. But I told myself that if I was going to write a cop story, that I wanted it to be realistic to the experience that I had, that my family members had, that friends have had, and that I actually saw. And I think for the most part, when I have read cop novels or I've watched films or, television, I've struggled because there's certain things that obviously are invented, but then there's also aspects of it where we don't actually see, with the exception of a few shows that I can name some, but with the exception of like Southland or like Boomtown, Homicide, Life on the Street, we don't see the police officers always as human beings. Oftentimes there's something that is more, almost mythological about, the officers and, this idea of, they almost represent an idea. They represent a concept. They become almost like walking billboards. And they lose something in that. Michael Connelly is excellent. Like what he's been able to do with Bosch is he's moved away from that. But I think oftentimes there's some novels that I've read where it really just kind of leans into that kind of, billboard, and it really trades on tropes and things like that. And some tropes are, accurate. I mean, officers, they drink a lot. At one point in time, there was a bar at the LAPD Academy. There was a bar on site because they said, at least if you drink here, you won't get in trouble.
Yeah. And they serve donuts too.
There you go.
It seems to me that whenever I see something that's centered on police and their life, it's either they are, like you were saying, it's almost they're this perfect billboard of some sort of meaning, something, whatever it is. Or either they're more like Bosch or Andy Griffiths. They're more of there's a lot of personality along with the cop side of it. But I think in a sense, you lose something in that too, don't you?
I agree. I think my approach has always been to start with the human being. I'm more interested in why someone would want to do the job than I am about how they do the job. And because so much of the job, if you're writing from a very realistic standpoint, is really like social work, to be quite honest, especially if you're working a beat. You're seeing the same individuals who continue to probably have issues in the community. You're acting as a counselor, a sounding board. You're trying to de-escalate. You're doing all different types of things that are more about working with the trials and tribulations of just being a human being who may be having maybe the worst day ever or the worst year ever. And so with that, I think there's a certain type of person who's willing to do that. And it moves away from, I would say, the super cop, right? It moves away from that sort of paradigm that's emerged. And it's more about, just a human being who is trying their best to do their job. And that's, in my opinion, far more realistic than, the brilliant detective or the super cop who's hunting down a serial killer or can get thrown out a window and bounce back the next scene. It's not, it's
There goes my fiction novels there, Al.
and that's just my, that's my taste. That's all. I think, and honestly, I think it has to do with the fact that I've grown up around it, and I've seen the toll that it actually takes. And I don't know if novels always tap into that there's a cost to it. There's something that the longer you're on the job, there's something that definitely is stripped away. And it's something I recognized in all the senior officers that I encountered. And, it was something that was just, I don't know if it was like kind of in their eyes or, they would force a smile. It was something that had been practiced to make it seem as if they were okay. And oftentimes you just kind of knew like, ooh, that person is not doing well, but they're showing up every day, and they're.
So Aaron, question is like your experience is primarily the LA Police Department,
Mm-hmm.
which is probably massive. So your stories are based in LA then as well?
Yes. I consider my stories to be neo-noir, LA, set in Los Angeles. I have written about the South though. I spent time in North Carolina and also Philadelphia. And so my first novel was set in Philly, and a small part of it in the South. But yeah, I think if anything, I'm, as a native Angelino, I enjoy writing about LA.
Did you ever worry about any sort of a backlash from people around you or cops or people that are in law enforcement at all when you kind of talk and write about this subject?
No, because quite frankly, they'd have to prove that it's not true.
Well, yeah, but some of it, that in their mind it might be true, and therefore it might some of it, and so maybe they're not going to be pleased with you kind of
airing dirty laundry.
Yeah, so to speak. You might be not saying any names and all that, but if you're writing about something in a particular, you're talking about these bad cops, like in this new book, and maybe there's a couple of bad cops that are kind of similar, and they will pick up that, even though you're not talking about them specifically. So they might not take to that kind of a book. That's all,
I mean, that's interesting. I mean, I think I've encountered more writers who have been cops who said, "Oh, you nailed it. You got it. You got it right." Or some people have read the book, and every once in a while I get an email from someone who either had law enforcement in their family or had been on the job themselves, and they say, "Well, I wasn't really expecting you to go there." And to me, my feeling when it comes to literature, when it comes to telling stories, is that it's kind of I attempt the 3 E's, which is to enlighten, entertain, and educate. And I kind of look at it as, if someone reads my books and says, "Hey, I had no clue," or "That's interesting," or maybe they disagree with it, I encourage them to explore for themselves. So if I do, and I haven't encountered any police officers who've been like, you shouldn't talk about those things, because there's a lot of things that I edit out myself. I do self-edit simply because if I get too into the weeds with, certain aspects of law enforcement, I just don't think the reader would care that much. I have to think about the audience. So there's certain things that I definitely might be in the first draft, but definitely are taken out by the time we move around to kind of the final draft. But, I haven't encountered any officers who have just been like, I don't want to, just say like, you shouldn't talk about that, or you should, why can't you just write about these other things? Because officers kind of know, like, these are the things that get talked about, when you're hanging around other cops. Things such as, police brutality and things like that. Those aren't taboo. Those are taboo for the public because we want to believe that, every officer is out there doing what they're supposed to do. But with a group of cops, like, I had an officer tell me once, he said, "I am so put out and disheartened by my profession. He said, I just don't understand what happened. Like he said, I don't get the political aspect. He said, I don't get any of that. He said, when I was on the job, he said, we did our job. We followed the law. And if someone did something wrong, he's like, you would pull their coattail and say, hey, don't do that again. And if they kept at it, then you would go ahead and you would report them and they would be dealt with. And he said, that's how it was. It was, he said all this kind of, blue religion stuff. He said, sure, it's always been there, but it's like, you didn't want that person out there because that made you look bad. He said there was a different sort of idea of like community when it came to policing. It was this idea that, well, we represent this and we have to be able to work with people if we're going to solve crime. So if there's somebody out there doing something that is not right and is essentially violating their mandate, well, that actually is bad for business, right? Because now it's going to make it harder for us to be able to solve crimes. We saw that in Baltimore, with the gun trace task force and the things that they were doing. Well, they couldn't solve anything because everybody said, you guys are dirty, you're crooked, you're robbing people. So they couldn't solve, their solve rate was atrocious, because no one wanted to talk to them. So, officers who are on the job and have been on the job, they know, now maybe if someone has it in their head that, officers are this one particular way, and, the idea that, a novel such as mine is now, painting police officers in a different light. Well, that's on them. That's because they've cooked up this fantasy in their head. But, police departments are nothing but a microcosm of society. There's all types of people out there.
To me, I can think of so many angles that you have talked about or can get into in this. This would be like a perfect Netflix series. Have you thought about that kind of thing with your protagonists or anything?
Well, sure. I mean, we're working on it.
Oh, okay.
So I do have a literary manager. Because I screenwrite as well. So I work with Bellevue, and so we are actually in the process of kind of getting that going. To see if, we can get some legs on it. The script is written, everything is kind of done. So it's just a matter right now of timing. I mean, it could happen in 6 months or it could happen in 3 years. But,
right.
That's the idea.
You just feel that. I mean, to me, it just fits.
I think so. I mean, I think that law enforcement shows are making a comeback. So for a while, nobody wanted to touch it. Right?
Well, don't mess with it too much because Al and I we like the documentary stuff going on with serial killers and stuff. So don't mess with us.
Yeah, we have your number. Well, I have to wonder, but because you talk about educate as well. So do you have like a subtext or some sort of a meaning under the entertainment part of it, under the procedural part of it that you kind of put in? Is there something like someone picks up your book, they read it, and they kind of you want them to get something?
I mean, I can't say that I have like a desire for them or necessarily like a motive for them to get something specific from it. I think if anything, I just want them to think, these are just things that deserve time and consideration because so much of what Trevor has to do impacts society as a whole. So many of the things that he encounters, and not just in his career, not just in law enforcement, but in his personal life, he has plenty of trials and tribulations that he goes through. And I just want to present human beings on the page. That's really the goal. And if people can relate to it or it shows a slice of life that they had never experienced before, then I consider that to be successful, But I think if I were to kind of distill it down to a theme, it would be that I don't believe heroes just appear or kind of come into the literary world as these, like I said, super cops or just, like heroic. I think that most people are human beings that have these true character moments where they show themselves as heroes. But I'm not so sure in my literary world that heroes necessarily exist, you know, and I think that it's a process to get to that point. Because a hero is someone who's willing to sacrifice everything, you know, for the greater good. And that's a big ask for most just everyday folks. And for me, when I'm writing, I think like that. I think like, you know, is Trevor a hero? Well, probably not, but he's trying, you know. I mean, he's, you know, every novel, he's going to try to do the right thing. And hopefully he'll emerge one day, maybe in book 5 or 6, where we could really say like, hey, like, you know, in the way Walter Mosley breaks it down, but say like he is a you know, a hero, you know, that he's a Black hero. And that's the hope. But I think that I'm more interested in the journey than having him start, you know, from square one, already having this code and being this heroic figure.
Right. You don't want him to start out like Mike there. You want him to work his way there.
That's right.
Can't just be at the top. You know. What do you find your writing process is like? You know, when you start a project like this and you kind of got the idea, are you able to assign yourself time? Say, okay, you know, there's nobody around from 3 to 5, so I'm going to sit and write. And there's nobody around on Tuesday, so I can write. Can you just assign scheduled time and write? Or do you have to have kind of the right mood thing going on, the right emotions kind of happening?
I would say it's a mix. I try to write every evening, so I'm more of a night writer. And I find that doing that, and I've been doing it for a few years, that kind of works for me. So most of the time I'll start, if I'm lucky, I'll start about 8 o'clock and I can write till maybe 12 or 1 o'clock. And then if inspiration hits, you know, throughout the day, I have I either put notes into my phone or have a small notebook that I kind of jot down, you know, and I'll make notes or things like that. And oftentimes it's just maybe a line of dialogue that will jog my memory when I actually can sit down at the computer and I'll remember what I was originally thinking for a particular scene. But that's kind of the process. And for each book, I have a composition book. And in that composition book is kind of pre-writing. So I outline chapters, and these outlines are rough sketches. Most of the time it'll just say what happens, just the actions. And then sometimes I'll journal. So if I'm journaling from the point of view of a character like Trevor, you know, I had a whole kind of journal entries about the loss of his mother and the relationship that was deteriorating with his father. So I had these kind of journal entries for him, and that kind of just helped me inform his way of his thinking, and essentially his baggage. And so he carries that pretty much in every scene. And then, you know, I would put that in there. So really, if anyone looked at these composition books, you know, they would think it was written by a madman who has all these different POV shifts and, you know, a whole lot going on, and think, what in the world is this? And how did you get a book out of it? But for me, it all kind of fuses together, and I'm able to think, okay, I know exactly, I'll go back to this journal entry on this page. And every once in a while I can pull from a journal entry, and that somehow will actually make its way into the novel.
How do you write evil characters, bad characters? Does it get to you, or can you do it easily? Or give us some names. Who do you know that you you write? You know, you must know some evil people, right? And so we won't tell anybody. But if you give us the names, we can. Yeah, just like does it difficult to write someone doing really bad things?
Yes and no. I think it depends on what the actions are. And I think sometimes I do pull from real police cases, some of them that we studied in the academy, or stories that our my training officer or, DI told, that just, some things do bother you. There was a story where, I don't know how it came up, but we were training CPR, and doing some, triage exercises. And, our instructor, for some reason, there was a little dummy that was like it was a practice dummy, but it was a child. And so he said, yeah, I remember this, family. And, he said they just kept mistreating their kid. And so the kid was crying and they shoved a sock into the kid's mouth. And so he took a moment and he said, yeah, I really, really wanted to hurt those people. And he said, we were able to save the kid, but he said that was what child abuse looked like. And that's the first time I actually saw it. He said he had never seen it before. He never had to deal with it. But he said that was the first time, that he had to deal with it. And so I thought, what type of individual would do such a thing, right? And so it becomes very taxing if you think on it incredibly hard, because you can't fathom those type of people, and the fact that they're out there and they walk among us, right? But I think, I have to always kind of detox that, and a lot of it was, learning to compartmentalize, and they taught us those things in the academy, and we had meditation class and things like that. And they said, you have to lean on what works and you have to detox it some kind of way. Otherwise it'll kind of, ultimately eat you up. Especially if you have to see that stuff firsthand. So when I think of evil characters, I often think of, characters that you just couldn't quite fathom why they were doing what they were doing. But oftentimes it's not a whole lot of fun to write a character who just is not redeemable, even if they are a villain. So I think for my peace of mind, just to stay sane, I always give them some sort of motivation, and reason that they're doing it. Because I think if I wrote the type of characters that we studied and learned, and that were prominent in some of these cases, trust me, nobody wants to read that.
Yeah. Unless they get caught, unless they lose. That's good.
Yeah.
Well, you can always drink at the bar at the cop shop and have some donuts if you need,
That's true. Or become an amateur boxer. There were so many amateur boxers, in law enforcement, and we had a, it's a really short story, but we had a training officer, and he would show up just pummeled, right? Like, I don't think he was a good boxer. He would show up just, and everybody acted like they didn't see it. It was the weirdest thing. I mean, we're talking about, black eyes and cut lip, and people would just, not stare, kind of avert their eyes. Like this was just, hey, this is just normal, but it was so interesting because whatever he was working out, he spent a lot of time on the canvas. So whatever he was getting out of that experience, I guess.
Maybe his wife was beating him.
See,
maybe he belonged to some dungeon club and he was S&N and all that. You never know. And nobody wanted to say anything because hey, it's like would you guys have a harness or something? Like what's going on there?
Repurposing.
Yeah, like really, what's going on?
Al, I think you should go in fiction, Al.
Yeah, the Dark Room, the Dark Room series. See, I'm helping you out here, just so you know. So you can use my ideas, please.
I will give you.
There you go.
Shout out.
Yeah, I have a sub series called the Dark Room. Anyway. Yeah, I know, because anything can happen. Do you like the cop shows and stuff, like detective shows you see on TV, series and stuff? And lately I've been, because I do weird things, but not in dark rooms, but in I've been watching a lot of the like Kojak and
The old stuff.
The old stuff on the archives. I've been going through some of the old series. Some of them are really good. I'm really surprised. I don't know why, but some of them are very good, and they're kind of like what you say. They're very human. They make a lot of mistakes. They screw up a lot, but they're trying to do the right thing, and there's a lot of character throughout the shows. I'm quite surprised, quite happy with some of them, actually, from the 60s and maybe early 70s. Do you have a favorite, or do you kind of ever get into any of those shows?
I do. I mean, I think when I look back, Police Story was really good. And I really enjoyed, I went back and I started watching some of them, and I was like, oh, this was pretty sophisticated. The storylines were pretty sophisticated just in terms of what they were, dealing with. And, later on, I think that, cop shows like Southland, Boomtown, even, Luther on BBC, were trying to do something different. And I really respect the shows that moved away from, kind of wrapping everything up in an hour, kind of like, people don't just confess, because you yell at them. You know what I mean? Like, if it was that easy, like, could you imagine? Like, but just because some officers, screaming at them, they're not just going to cave. You know what I mean? So I really like, the shows that dealt with it realistically, and I did it. Oftentimes people get away. Like Homicide: Life on the Street is my all-time favorite.
Have you seen Hill Street Blues, the older one?
Oh yeah, Hill Street Blues. Yeah,
that always hooked me.
Yeah, it was great because they were, like you said, they were human beings. And my favorite episode of Homicide was, Frank Pimbleton, who's played by Andre Braugher, is like this incredible investigator, but he's really, really good in the box, right? He can really, really turn it up the heat. And, this was his skill, but it was so detrimental that he ends up having a stroke in the middle of an interrogation. And I thought, that's writing, because you see him and his performance just in the box as he interrogates these, suspect after suspect, and, they all kind of are afraid of him. He strikes something, deep inside of them where they don't know what's going to happen. He never gets physical, but it's just what we called in the police academy command presence. His command presence was so strong. But you finally get to see the toll that was taking. And he has this, this massive stroke, while he's interrogating the suspect. And his partner has to come to his aid. And so, things like that captures kind of what I was saying at the start of this idea, that there's a cost that has to be paid when you're really good at what you do, and what you do is police work. There's a cost.
Right. Well, because the more you put into it and yourself, it takes something out of you, right? It changes you. So, and I think that's the trick to catching something good in a story. And that's why some of these shows I was kind of like, wow, there's some of them, because it actually caught them where they were struggling, and it took a lot out of them. They came out of it a different person, which quite often in series TV, like you say, it's just, it became formula, beginning, middle, end, and it missed a lot of that. So I'm impressed when I see that sort of thing. But what does it take out of you, in a sense, when you write one of these books? You put a lot of your time, effort, research, writing, struggle, stress, ups and down, dark room, all that stuff. So you do all that stuff, but at the end of it, so you get the book, like Blue Like Me's coming out here. It's all exciting. It's good. It's wrapped up. Fantastic. There's good feelings. But how do you think that the process of doing a book like this changes you?
Well, I'm forced to have to revisit certain aspects, of my past, or certain feelings that I had. So every time I think, okay, I'm writing another Trevor story, you know, I have to put myself in that mindset, from years ago, you know, and, you know, especially if I'm like writing his, you know, a scene with his father and that dynamic and things like that. And, you know, I'm having to kind of think more in line with a tired, worn out cop. You know, which is, I mean, I liken it to maybe what actors have to go through, because you kind of have to, as you're writing, you have to play these characters. And, you know, you have to kind of, at the end, kind of detox it, because, you know, I don't want to walk around with Trevor particularly. I mean, I think Trevor's a great character and is becoming more and more of a nice guy, but I don't want him in my head all the time. You know, so it's just a matter of, you know, being able to detox. I mean, I hear a lot of writers who say after the first draft, they'll take like a month and just go do something else. I think Stephen King, was saying he takes like a month and, you know, just kind of lets it go and then goes back to it. And I think that's kind of sounds to me like a healthy approach. I unfortunately don't have the luxury to take a full month, but I try and take at least a week.
Doesn't craft beer help? It does me.
It does.
Yeah, as he's drinking.
It's true.
Yeah. Well, I think that's great, but that's pretty cool. But at the end of it, do you ever, because you've had a few books out now, do you ever look back at your earliest books and reread them and think, wow, geez, I'd like to change this?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. I mean, there's, you know, it's, I think that you're eternally editing. You know, if you pick up something that you wrote, years ago, you know, my brain goes into edit mode and I'm just like, oh, I would strike this, because as you mature as a writer, you know, you realize like oftentimes less is more. And I think early on, and I'm sure other people may feel the same way, but you tend to kind of, at least I did, to overwrite. And I think that, you know, as I mature as a writer and with each book, you know, I'm getting better at self-editing. And I think that, you know, as you progress, you realize that you don't need, people are interested in the story, and that's what they want to read. And while prose is wonderful, don't get me wrong, like, you know, I try and spice up my prose by reading poetry and finding ways to just get at the heart of something with, you know, as few words as possible. And that's kind of my constraint. Like, I put that on myself. Like, how can I say what I need to say in a very succinct, you know, albeit like noirish way, where it's just straight to the heart, you know, Hammett, master at it. Right. So like, that's kind of what I try to do. So when I go back and I read those books, you know, my earlier books, I can see where I was almost there, but then I'll say, you know, had I just cut these 3 words, it would have been a perfect sentence, you know?
Yeah. It's kind of one of those things. I think you could constantly do that your whole life.
Yeah.
Go back and keep rewriting. New edition. It's the endless process.
It is. Yeah, very much so.
Well, so let's talk about the public. Do you hate them as much as I do? No. As in, like, do you do a social media with readers? Do you like to interact? Do you have places that people can follow you on? Do you have a website? How do you like to interact with readers? Well,
truthfully, I'm not a huge social media person, but I do have accounts. So, you know, I would say if anything, I'm more on Facebook than I am on anything else. I do have Instagram, and that's at @_write me a world. And then I also have Twitter, which shares the same handle. However, I most likely will be leaving Twitter, as chaos is sure to ensue in the next few weeks.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I, you know, personally, I don't know. I'm just sitting back and waiting because I don't know, but I'm sure hearing things like,
I mean, at some point we'll all get bills. we'll all get,
yeah.
we'll all be invoiced, $1,000 for our Twitter use.
Yeah. Well, actually that's okay. If you get a bill, you get an invoice, just send it on to Michael there. He'll take care of it. Okay?
Of course. That's right.
He loves to help people out as much as he can on things like that. So
that's great.
By all means, everybody,
I'll tell all my
just
friends.
email it. Yeah, just email us here at the station, and I'll make sure he gets it, and he'll take care of everything.
Well, right now everybody's bummed at me because I'm a Bills fan and we're doing so well. So I gotta just.
Buffalo, it's just, that's momentary too. Doesn't really matter.
Okay.
Well, so we'll have everything up on the website so people can find you. In fact, I'll try and get your phone number up there too. So, but no, actually, so how you must have been writing this over this pandemic, I think they called it, the last couple of years, and there's like some crazy stuff going on, and apparently some weirdo with bad hair was president and stuff. And what was it like trying to write during all of that outside stress?
Well, I mean, there was outside stress, and then, naturally you kind of have the inside stress, primarily from being stuck inside. So,
Right. Yeah.
it was,
Yes.
it was taxing, but at the same time, and I can't describe it. It's like, and maybe it kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier, but when you have a story that you just feel like this is it, like I feel like this needs to be read. This needs to go out into the world. And I just kept focusing on it. I just kept focusing. So while all these other things are happening, I told myself to be cognizant and be intentional about where I put my energy. And so writing at that time really became, like meditation, because I was able to escape into this world that I created. And I felt like I was able to kind of unplug a little bit. But, and truthfully, in many ways, writing has remained that. And so I look forward to kind of being able to escape. Now, sometimes the outside world bleeds in and, ways that, I don't always expect. Right now I'm writing, my work in progress. I'm a huge, Patricia Highsmith fan, and I wanted to write kind of a nod to the talented Mr. Ripley, but set in the music industry and specifically hip hop. And I wanted a kind of a sociopathic yet brilliant, somewhat brilliant character. And the characters changed a little bit, but I had this idea of how, a sociopath would act in the music industry, especially one who had no talent, and how they would leverage those around them and manipulate. And while I was writing, I have been focused on the number of artists, hip hop artists, who seem to just be dying every month, oftentimes violently. And, it just kind of, I already had that kind of in my head. I was like, there's so many artists who just kind of don't seem to make it till 50, with the exception of some of the older artists, especially like Snoop Dogg and, they're grandparents now, but the new artists can't seem to get past 30 years old. And so it was just so interesting to me. And a lot of times their cases don't go solved. They go unsolved. People can't even find out, who actually pulled the trigger in a lot of cases. So that was kind of in my head. And so, as I was writing, especially over the last 3 months, more artists were dying, and that kind of bled into a little bit into the storyline. This idea of having success, and in the case of this character is not really a nice character. But this idea of willing to risk everything for success, and to, in many ways, come up through, this kind of hard knocks situation only to die a millionaire at 30. It just seemed so interesting to me, and that in this idea of never truly being feeling safe and never really being able to let your guard down, even though you can do whatever you want, you have the means, the financial means to go anywhere in the world, and to escape, and if given the opportunity, how many artists would do that? I don't think many would, and I think that, this idea that ultimately, do you go into it thinking, hey, life is going to be short, so I'm going to have a lot of fun and make records and spend money and drive fast cars, because I don't know if I'm going to make it till 50. So that's kind of, the idea that I'm toying with, but, reality started to bleed into that, as a lot of these cases, because I think a hip hop artist died yesterday. Yeah. So.
Yeah, there's always,
Jeez.
Well, it's certainly been a great conversation. I find it very interesting and really appreciate you being here. Now, the book we are talking about, you have to get. It's called Blue Like Me, and it's book 2 of the Trevor Finnegan series. And our guest is the author, Aaron Phillip Clark. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun. It was great chatting.
You've been listening to the House of Mystery radio show. To find out more about our guests, hosts, or show, go to www.houseofmystery.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Well, good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.
You've been listening to the House of Mystery radio show. To find out more about our guests, hosts, or show, go to www.houseofmystery.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Well, good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.